This is Jason Schwartz. Recently, in fact, in the month of June, there was a great program that was put on down at the Hagai Institute in Kihei. It was sponsored by the Maui Planning Commission and the Kihei Community Association, and I guess you'd say it was the brainchild of Joe Bertram, who we've all known is active in greenways and bikeways and has been active on the Maui Planning Commission in planning a more sane and livable Maui future. What you're going to see as we watch this tape together, the planning of a downtown Kihei, the visioning of a future for an area that has had a boom of growth, a growth that's more than twice the rate of quick and out of control developing countries. We now have a responsibility to our island and to ourselves to get involved, to plan the future living area of a beautiful place, our home, here in Kihei and here in Maui. I am Jason Schwartz of the Dreammakers Foundation, Maui Arts and Music Association, and an independent producer at Akaku, Maui Community Television, which has now switched from Channel 13 to Channel 44 with 45 with council meetings. On 44 we have all kinds of different shows. The Maui Arts and Music Association, art, music, energy, and environment. 4 components of a very wide and all-encompassing vision that involves you, that involves what you dream of, and ways to make dreams come true through interaction and cooperation. It is my great pleasure to present this show to you today. I hope you find it of great enjoyment and benefit and education, and I hope it will motivate you to getting involved in the planning process and coming out and being supportive of creating a vision for Kihei and these islands. Aloha.
But it's a structure, you don't direct it in a way. And because I went to this thing where they had this 100-year plan, they were trying to rent from Maui. Oh, that was here. Yeah, they were going to try and do a 100-year plan. They said, well, they just set us out with no direction or anything. He says, I was on a transportation committee. He says, okay, let's talk about transportation. Well, what does that mean? So when you direct it, you actually just look at the community plans, look at the general plans, say, here are the provisions that talk about what has already been decided or agreed upon. And then, what do you want to see? Do you want to see jitneys? Do you want to see electric cars? And so then you combine those two and you come up with a vision. And that's basically what we're doing here. The same thing. It's just getting people together so that you can first look at what's supposed to be here according to the plan, and then vision out show what other communities have done to make a good, successful downtown. And then we put our own vision out there. What do you want to see? Hawaiian? We need a Hawaiian element here. What is it going to be? Is it going to be in the administrations? Is it actually going to be a hale? Maybe a canoe hale or something like that? So these are things that we can discuss and then come up with some kind of plan. And so they've never done this, where you actually then let's sit down and work it out ahead of time. When the next developers come in, down below the software.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're going to start off the program today with a pule by Joe Bertram.
Thank you. Aloha, everybody. Thanks for getting up in the morning and coming here. I know it's not easy on a Saturday. We were going to do a Hawaiian pule, but couldn't find a Hawaiian. So we decided to be a little bit more specific to what we're doing here today. And so we're going to ask for an audience participation pule, basically. And it'll be done to the tune of Downtown. I know most of you folks probably know that song by Petula Clark. And we have our accompaniment here. And so what we'll do is, as we sing the words, I'll point to you when your word comes up. And your word is downtown, okay? So let's just see if we can get this together here. This is my...
Good morning. I'm Jason. I'm the designated assistant singer.
Downtown, everything's waiting for you.
What's the price of admission, huh?
All right, and so now that we're warmed up, I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Good morning, aloha, everyone. My name is Lisa Nguyen. I'm Director of Planning, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's workshop entitled Visioning a Downtown for Kihei. By looking at the agenda, you can see that we've planned an action-packed day for everyone. It's basically going to start out with about an hour and a half of information about the downtown Kihei area, after which we're going to break into groups where each group will be given maps and you'll be asked to kind of vision in your own group collectively. After that, we'll break for lunch, and after lunch, we'll come back and each of the groups will give a presentation of what they found in their visioning process, and we'll end the day with a summary of everything of all the groups. And with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. He's Mr. Dave DeLeon, an executive aide to Mayor Linda Lingle, who has an exciting announcement to share with everyone.
I'm always impressed with Joe. What energy. So let's hear another round of applause for Joe. What amazing. But Joe, keep the day job. The mayor asked me to give her warmest regards and aloha to you and tell you that she shares a lot of your goals, and especially the idea of finding a center for Kihei. She wrote a paper to that effect about 7 years ago when she first became mayor. It's called Kihei, Next 5 Lefts, or Next 5 Rights. I don't forget which one it is. I think it's Next 5 Rights, off a sign that's up on the highway. I have the privilege to come today before you and tell you we've actually made some progress on the Kihei Greenway. We were all here about 2 years ago, and we were doing another Joe Bertram vision. And the vision was the creation of a coastal and general pedestrian kind of corridor that would make Kihei a little more livable and a little less car-dominated. Well, we've been negotiating off and on with Balma Malama, and Balma Malama has been a very willing partner in this negotiation. And we've come to a conclusion and an agreement where Balma Malama, you might have read in the newspaper, well, the newspaper story was half the account, and we're going to give you the other half today. Balma Malama gave us, in this agreement, agreed to give us the use of the land, or title to the land, and to do the engineering for this project. And the mayor's committed to attempting to get this project into construction this year. The project we're talking about now is basically in those electric lines is the right-of-way, and we'll be going from Lepoa to Kulani Hakoi, about a mile in distance. It'll be an independent path separated from the north-south collector corridor road with on a park-like setting. And again, this is a Joe Bertram dream that's been out there. I first heard from him about this about 8 years ago. I guess we're right on schedule. The Maui County is going to be responsible for the permits, getting federal funding. Federal funding is a key component to this, and I'll tell you more about that in the future, and then move towards construction. The project, as envisioned, you'll see typical sections over here, and you'll also see a route. Joe's over at them right now. The typical section is in motion right now. We were originally thinking of 2 separate paths, and that's not thrown out totally yet. But we're also talking about maybe bringing it into a 1-path kind of arrangement. The 2 paths would be about 6 foot wide each, going in opposite directions. 12-foot path would be like a small road, basically, with traffic moving to opposite directions. Both have their limitations and their potential benefits. And that's part of what we would like to engage the community in, because the trade-offs for getting the 2, I just learned this morning, as a matter of fact, talking to the engineers, the trade-off for getting 2 paths would be cutting back on some of the vegetation, and maybe not having as big as trees or as much vegetation on the project. This project will be built to ADA standards, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act standards, which means that it'll be totally wheelchair accessible for people with those kind of limitations. The problem with that in these kind of designs is that means it'll also be accessible to motorcycles, which is something maybe the community will be able to help us with policing, and so we don't have that kind of problem here. We do have a path like this. There is a prototype on Maui if you want to see one, and that is on the Makai side of Kahului Airport. Runs for 1.25 miles. It starts at the end of Kanaha Beach Park and goes around to Sprecklesville Road. And I'll give you a sense of what we're doing. Very similar project. The only difference is that one was built as an emergency road. It had a bridge in it that'll take a fire engine. So it's going to have structurally be a little stronger than what this one will be. This path will cross Waipilani Gulch on a ford, so we're not going to build a bridge across for this project. If the North-South Collector Road is built in the future, then we'll be talking about a bridge at that point. But right now, we're just crossing it on a ford. We have not, oh yeah, there's also the R1 water, which is the reclaimed water from the wastewater treatment plant, is now down to this point, right about at the start of this project, and will be accessible. So we will be able to use recycled water to irrigate this project and keep it clean, keep it right nice and green. We're hoping to be able to engage the community in maintaining and taking care of this project as well, and maybe get a sense of community ownership with it. We find that these kind of projects work better with that kind of ownership. Government does an okay job, the community does a better job when they have a sense of ownership. We're looking at a cost under $1 million. Depends on what we put in, depends on the vegetation, depends on whether we have lighting, for instance, and that's another thing we need to hear from the community about. Do you want night lights on this? It seems to me that Kihei is urban enough that maybe it would be appropriate to have night lights to keep it safe and well lit. But we need to have community input on that. If I were to try that in Haiku, I'd be in a lot of trouble. We will be incorporating the existing path on the Kulania Koi side of the project. There's a 6-foot wide path there now, and we'll be adding to that and making it in the same standard as the rest of the project. And also, I've been talking to the Betzel's organization, and they seem like they're willing to take us and put it into their project as well. So that will, in effect, there's a bikeway that connects to the youth center. We will end up connecting for the youth center and the school, which somebody who's advocating bicycle transportation, that's really a neat thing to have happen, because then you have really good nodes of need on both ends, and you have people really wanting to use it. The key is, again, as I mentioned earlier, federal funding, and we met with the federal government on Friday, yesterday, and their immediate response is, this is the kind of project that the ICE-T law was written for, and so they seem very, very positive and very, very supportive. So at this point, well, ICE-T, let me explain what that is. It's an acronym. It's standing for the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991. Only the government could do something like that. Now they're going to call it T21. The law that the president just passed is going to change that acronym that we've all grown very used to using. What's important about ICE-T or T21 is it's the 20-80 grant match. And we put up $1, they put up $4. So it's just about, basically the federal government pays for it just about. It's a key component to this, and we're looking forward to being able to get that kind of funding for it. I'd be open for some very, very brief questions. I don't want to throw, this was not meant to, I just wanted to give a chance to tell you folks what's happening, and I didn't want to break up the flow for the downtown discussion, but just wanted to give you a sense that one of the projects you guys talked about at the 2000 meeting 2 years ago is moving ahead, and we're trying to get it into construction. I'll take any questions you might have briefly. Not? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Before we start, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank a lot of the people that made this event possible. We've spent about 2 months trying to plan this and bring this event to fruition, and some of the key components were Mr. Robert Freeman of the Freeman Group, the developers of the Pi'ilani Commercial Center, Natalie Kim of Baldwin Malama, developers of the Pi'ilani Village, Mr. Chris Hart, John Min, and David Blaine, all of Chris Hart and Partners. And also, we'd like to thank Clifford Mukai of Warren Unimori Engineers, the staff of the Planning Department, especially Bill Medeiros, who's with us today, our GIS specialist, and the Hagai Institute. They were very gracious in the donation of this facility today to allow us to hold the event here. And certainly last but certainly not least, Joe Bertram, who had the vision to have this workshop and all that energy to make it happen. So we'd like to say a big mahalo to all those people. We have Mr. Chris Hart from Chris Hart and Partners and David Blaine from Chris Hart and Partners. And I think David's going to start us off with the program now with the planning overview and the existing conditions.
I think this will pick it up. We don't have to hold it in our hands, but I want to thank everybody for turning. Maybe I should get this. Thank you. We're very excited about the turnout. On Monday, we had about 24 people signed up, and we figured, well, that's manageable, and we ended up with almost 80. I wanted just a few introductory words. I hope everybody has fun today. This is supposed to be a relaxing, and I hope people get loud and laugh and all that. It's not a, I don't know about you, but whenever I go to a conference and they say they're going to have breakout sessions, I go, oh God, they're going to make me chairman. I'm going to have to make a presentation. I don't know how to draw. I was going to sneak out at lunch and see how the U.S. Open was doing, and now I can't, and all of that kind of thing. Let's just get the right attitude for all of this, because we don't really know what we're doing either. I went to one workshop on a charrette, but I've never done a real one. I'm not sure how many people here have. So we're all going to learn together and have some fun with it. A little plug, in September, the ACPO conference is going to be held. This is a statewide conference, and we're going to do a very similar process in Wailuku. Kihei has a problem of maybe too much growth, and Wailuku has a problem of too little. But it's still the same process of looking at that downtown, seeing what we can do. So we're all volunteers here. We're, even though we may be planning professionals, we're certainly not charrette professionals. And I don't even know if, is someone going to explain where the word came from? Okay, I couldn't even spell it. It has 2 R's, incidentally. But it's a new process for us, and we just hope everybody relaxes and takes it in that sort of proper atmosphere. I wanted to talk a little bit about history of a community, primarily because it's one of the main themes we're going to discuss as we get into our breakout sessions, and why it's important. Every human settlement is there for a reason. There's forces at work. Some are positive, some are negative. And Kihei is no different. But why are we here? Why is Kihei here? It's important to study that. You get a sense of pride, you get a sense of history, of identity, of belonging, of a thread that goes between the past. It's hard for us to sit and envision the future if we don't have a little bit of a discussion and knowledge of those forces that brought us here from the past. Some of the other aspects, again, I'm talking about the sense of place we'll get into, is the history of architecture, the buildings, the styles, the colors. Kihei doesn't have many structures left, but there's probably photos and pictures and a vision. And again, and you have to decide, do we want to take that and build on it, or is it a historical thing that we thought was, inappropriate? We want to come up with new styles. I'll let you know I tried to do this right away. I think those historical styles are very important. Something as simple as place names. We were talking the other day, what is this area called? If you lose your history, you lose just naming areas that make some sense. And I was thinking of Lahaina, which has Hono'api'ilani Highway running through it. That sounds very nice. You have South Kihei Road. It doesn't really flow. Who said it has to be South Kihei Road? Probably some engineer back in the 1920s, Maybe it's a nice name, maybe it's not, but think about the names and how they flow and how they help describe the areas, and particularly, are there separate communities within Kihei that have their own identity and their own names, and where are they? Restoration and preservation. What are those areas, whether they're wetlands or heiaus or the first sugar mill or whatever, that you want to restore? That's part of the downtown area. We're only focusing on a specific section, but what is in there that we want to sort of draw a red line around and say we don't want to touch this, or we want to restore, or we want to make sure that people come here and see it. And the flip side is, hey, here's something we don't want people to come and trample over and look at. You know, we want it preserved in a different way. I think we have to identify those. And landscaping. What was the native vegetation? If there was native vegetation that survived here, it did it for a reason. It was appropriate. What are the introduced species? And the landscape architects, we have several here today, can help us with that. What's exotic? What do we want to promote? What do we want to eradicate? That, again, has a great importance as we get into the themes and get into the streetscapes of the community. And lastly, just the ownership patterns. There was a sizable Hawaiian community here. What happened? The aggregation of large properties. If you look at ownership, in many cases, that also gives you an indication of what happened in the history of the community. So those were sort of just general, history as a topic. I was asked to talk about the history of Kihei in particular, and I agreed to, except I don't know any. I went to the bookstore in the Hawaiiana section. I said, do you have any literature on the history of Kihei? And the sales clerk just kind of looked at me like, Kihei doesn't have a history. Everybody assumed that Bill Azeka founded Kihei in 1972. But it does have a history, and I think, and I made some of these similar comments 2 years ago, that the idea of a Kihei Historical Society, someone laughed and said, well, that's an oxymoron. Well, it's not. A lot of things went on here. There was a tremendous Hawaiian community. There was fish ponds, there was taro, there was springs, wetlands. The environment changed. Much of the hillside was sandalwood. A lot of this was cut down. It changed the whole environment of the area. It was much cooler. It was much wetter. I was told there was a cotton plantation here and a sugar plantation. What happened to those? The impact of the military. There were tens of thousands of troops stationed in this area during the war. What impact? Was there a lasting impact of that? One of the discussions that just came up was the fact that they dynamited the reef after the war. The war was already over, and I guess they had some dynamite left over and some free time, and they went out and just sort of blew a hole in the reef. But we are still feeling the effects of that today in the erosion rate along Palama Street. And again, I mentioned some of the land ownership patterns. But I'm not going to tell you about this, because as I say, I don't know that much, but I think the community is really waking up that the idea of a historical center, a historical museum, or restored something as maybe one of the elements of the downtown where people can go and see the pictures and read the names and actually find out what happened in a community that actually does have a very rich history, but people just seem to think it started in '72 with the first condominiums, and that just simply isn't true. I'm just going to dwell on a few facts and figures. Chris is really going to take you into what we would call the modern era from '68 on in terms of the planning process, the development process, but I want to throw a few numbers out at you. In 1972, this region had a population of approximately 1,500 people. Today, 25 years later, it has about 15,000. Any meaningful growth rates have to go over at least a 20-year period. We went at 25. That is a compound growth rate of 9% per year. Now remember, people grow like money in the bank. There's 1,500, then there's 1,700, then 4% of that, so that your growth curve is continually getting steeper and steeper as you compound on the people that were there before. 20-year average, the United States has grown at about 1.8% a year. Hawaii, 2.2. Everybody thinks Hawaii's had explosive growth, but if you average it out over the long term, it's not a whole lot more. It has grown faster than the United States as a whole, but not a lot more. And out of control, third world country, I don't know whether Nigeria or someplace, grows at 4% a year. You simply cannot have enough food, enough resources, enough anything to support that kind of population growth. Kihei grew at 9%. Even more perspective, Kihei really didn't take off until 1978 when the completion of the Central Maui transmission line. This is a 36-inch water line, carries about 12 million gallons of water a day all the way 12 miles across the valley above the Waihe Golf Course. It was this water line that really fueled the growth of Wailea, of Kihei, of the Cebu project. That came in 1978, and 1992, to some extent, the bubble burst. All the Japanese investment, that tremendous growth, all the hotels were done. If you can, and so it's flattened out. In fact, Kihei maybe even has lost a little bit. So that growth rate really was in a period of 14 years. That's a compound growth rate of 17%. This is 4 to 5 times what I say is an unmanageable rate of growth for a third world country. My point is that we now have to catch up to a lot of the infrastructure, the social facilities, the planning, the visioning that went on, because this was essentially a boomtown type of growth. And I was just talking with Russell Gucci. We said we wish we had this in 1972 and say, where are we going to go when there wasn't much here? But it's one of the greatest challenges to any planner is to go into a community that's already built. And again, just in summary, nothing is cast in concrete. You know, the fact that it's here, the roads are here, it doesn't mean that we can't guide and start to work on the process and get a community that's a little more distinctive and a little more livable. There's a tremendous amount of energy in Kihei in the community. Planners don't do it, architects don't do it. I can think of other communities, if we had this meeting, there'd be like 6 people here. Here we have almost 100. So, as Dave DeLeon said, it's the community that makes the difference. And the fact that we have all these professionals volunteering their time, large property owners that are giving both, land and time and resources, and the community turning out on a Saturday when the U.S. Open is on right now, is really an indication that there is a lot of excitement, a lot of talent going on, and hopefully today, if we can all, just relax a little bit and have some fun, I think there'll be a tremendous product that comes out of it. So with that, thank you, and Chris is going to sort of take us into the, quote, modern era.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Dave and I have been friends for a long time, and it's kind of interesting that we'd be on the podium together. It's kind of like, as Dave said, it's kind of like frickin' frack. I have, I think, the benefit, at least, of being a historical figure. Actually, I started with the Maui County Planning Department in 1970, and I worked in the department for 20 years and 6 months through the end of 1990. And
you did all that.
Oh yeah, we did. I did it all. And that's one of the interesting points I was going to mention. People would say, "Oh, gosh, you guys have done such a great job with Maui and your planning. What happened to Kihei?" So in 1993, I decided to move to Kihei. All right, and believe me, it's a really great place to live. And I've actually become a member of the Kihei Community Association, a member of the board of directors, and over the past 5 years have been intimately involved with the community and through Kihei 2000 and other projects that we've worked on with Joe Bertram and Gene Thompson and Susan Bradford and other people in the community, Carla Flood, and it's through their interest in this place and the desire to make it really a livable community that we're here today. And of course, Joe has kind of been a point man. Now he's got himself in a politically sensitive and important position with the Maui County Planning Commission. So, but anyway, it's important to realize that there's a lot of interest in Kihei because it is a very desirable place to live. I've lived in Kula, gotten up at 5 o'clock in the morning at 42 degrees and tried to build a wood fire. I've lived in Haiku for many years, taking my kids to the car, falling down in a mud puddle during a rain, on my way to work. I really enjoy Kihei. It's a very nice place to live. And, it has to do with what's actually happening in other parts of the country. I mean, I grew up in the Rust Belt in the Northeast, and everybody moved to Florida and down to Phoenix. And, of course, Kihei is a climate that's very similar to New Mexico and the Phoenix area in Southern California and so on. So it's not unusual, it's not any great mystery that Kihei should be a popular place and a place that's going to grow. In 1969, which was basically a year before I joined the planning department, there was an effort undertaken, probably somewhat similar. There was a 701 plan, general plan for Kihei that was in its initial stages of being developed. That plan was worked on for about a year, and it was actually, the report document was adopted in 1970. In 1969, there was also the adoption of the general plan. Now, Kihei is a coastal community. It goes all the way from Maui through Kealia and all the way down now to Cebu, Wailea, Cebu, and La Perouse. It's a coastal community. It's like Southern California in many, many respects. And as a result of that, that same kind of development has occurred. One of the other interesting aspects of Kihei is that it is an ahupuaha. And you know, in the Hawaiian definition of land parcelization, the land was actually parcelized from the ocean to the mountain. So we have this long horizontal, you know, running north and south, parallel with the ocean. And then we also have these long, thin locks running Mauka and Makai. So it's kind of an interesting character of development that results. We have these long kind of condominiums and so on like that. I think the Maui Coast Hotel is probably a good example. Everybody can see that. It's just a long linear type of building. So a unique kind of architecture begins with the zoning as a result of the zoning to evolve. Kihei is a great community, like I say, and at that time, in 1970, 1968, 69, and 70, Kihei was part of Maui County and identified as part of Maui County as the place that could actually support a lot of growth and development. At least there was a vision to understand that because of the climate in Kihei at that time, that it was going to become a very important part of Maui's visitor destination growth and development over the next, into the future. And in fact, it's really interesting to me, if you read the introduction to the planning document that was created in 1968, 69, and 1970, it says, in planning for the inevitable development of the Kihei region, the highest goals were set. The problem was to ensure the balanced and orderly growth of an almost underdeveloped area on the brink of explosive expansion into a resort community with a population that could reach 150,000 people by the year 1985. Oh, that's what the introduction says. The plan had to be innovative, involve the direct participation of as many as possible of the people to be most directly affected by the plan, the present residents and landowners and future developers. Now, thank God it didn't happen. As David said, we're something around 20,000 people. And we have this opportunity, actually 28 years later, to sit down and to still look at what's actually developed so far, what is planned for the future, and to make some important adjustments, refinements in the process. Now, in 1969, 1970, the general plan, which was called the 701 plan, was adopted. And then in 1969, the Kihei zoning map was adopted, which again was designed to stimulate economic development. And what the county decided to do was to zone everything, give it all away, zone it all. And so it's all been zoned. And of course, as Dave said, when the water line came in, everything was available to be developed. And so essentially that's what's happened. We're in a developing community. And you know, a lot of us are from communities that, you know, developed 40 or 50 years before we were born. All the issues, the infrastructure issues, parks and recreation concerns, and so on, were all solved before we got here. But now, we're in a community where we have to actually meet them head on and solve those problems, and that's what we're here for today. I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to say that in terms of the next step in the process, in 1980 there was an effort to look at planning in Maui County in a more comprehensive manner. So at that time, there was the adoption of the Maui County General Plan, which is a Word document that sets forth goals, objectives, policies for development of the county overall, including, Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe. And it was also the identification of 9 community planning regions. And the Kihei McKenna region, the South Maui region that I talked to you about, is a uniquely distinct geographic region of Maui, and it was identified as a community plan district. Obviously, it's unique as you compare it with someplace like Hana, for instance, which is also a region. It has a unique and a distinctive character. As part of that process, there was pretty much an adoption or an assumption of the existing information, assuming of the existing information that went before as far as the 701 plan was concerned. It was basically incorporated. In 1992, there was an update that was undertaken. And that update was really designed to be a refinement of what had been done before. But of course, it ended up being a lot more. And we got involved in project districts going up the side of the mountain and all kinds of things up Haleakala. And of course, in the council process, it was all brought back. The community was alarmed by what was going to happen, or what might happen, the additional opportunities for growth and development beyond what was already shown in the community plan. So they got involved, and they actually formed a group called Kihei 2000. And Kihei 2000 worked, we all met together for, I don't know, I talked to Susan Bradford, she says that it was around 2 years. She said it felt like more like 5 years. The process took 6 years as far as the adoption of the plan, but we incorporated a lot of important components in the text of the plan, designed to bring about a process and guidelines that will result in Kihei being a more livable place. And some of those have to do with urban design, as David was talking about, open space issues, the provision of open space. All of that language is in the plan, and there's no other plan in the County of Maui that has such specific language that will, in the future, allow for the growth and development of Kihei in a more sensitive and a more humane, livable way as far as we, the residents. Also, like something like the Heritage Corridor is something that's already come out of that, and you already see that happening. The Greenway that we just talked about is something that came out of Kihei 2000 and the efforts at that time. So we are here today to really further articulate what we had proposed in the community plan, and concentrating specifically on this geographic area as a civic community center in Kihei. Now, it's the largest business commercial area in Kihei. I call it civic because it has the schools, it's going to have a community center, it has post office, it's going to have other kinds of probably civic public type facilities. It's also basically the central kind of business district in Kihei, and I'll get involved in that and discussing it a little bit more. But right now, let's see, where are we? We're at the existing conditions and constraints, right? What I'd like to do is just say that, again, because of the linear character of Kihei, there are basic 4 communities that were identified in the community plan, the updated plan. One is the one that's at the most farthest north, which is in the vicinity of Suda Store. And if we look at Kihei and we call it a town, if we call it a city, a town and a city is composed of either neighborhoods or villages. I'm going to prefer to call them villages. We could call that Kealia Village. We could call this Lipoa Village. We could call Kalama Park area Kalama Village. We could call the commercial area at Kamaoli Village. It's important that each one has an identity. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, establishing these kinds of identity. We're going to look at this area first. In terms of existing conditions and constraints, now obviously there's been a lot of construction, and there's also been a lot of projects planned. And We have a great base map that we're going to be using that was provided by Unamori Engineering. And on that base map, we show the roads. We show the existing projects. It's an aerial, so you know where Azeka Place is, you know where Long's Drugs is, you know where all of St. Teresa Church is, and so on and so forth, the school and so on. So we know where everything is. These are our basic constraints, and essentially what we're going to do in the context of the roads that are planned, the roads that are existing, is try to propose ways to make Kihei a more livable community by basically softening some of the edges that exist and make the shopping centers maybe more accommodating to the pedestrian. Basically, all I'd like to say in terms of this issue of constraints is that we are essentially going to be working within a framework that has developed, and we're going to make recommendations that will allow us to soften what's existing and allow us to make more positive recommendations in the context of what's proposed, so that the end result will be a community that everyone will feel much more comfortable in as a pedestrian, and that the opportunity will still exist for efficiency in terms of the operation of the automobile. Dave, maybe you want to say something about that.
Just very quick, I was maybe have Dave Good just for a moment. If you read the community plan, it talks about Road A and Road F and Road C and North-South Collector and all, and I've never understood them, and I think some of them have real names now anyway. Maybe again, before we get into the processes, maybe Dave, could you just point out on the map roads that are there, roads that are planned, and roads that maybe are going to get expanded in their present configuration. Again, part of the process is to just say we have certain things that are givens as we work on our plans. We can't pretend it's a wide open field out there. I don't know if you want the mic or...
Morning, everyone. I'm David Good. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works. A lot of you know me already. No, you don't. What I'd like to do is stand a little bit on what Chris said in terms of opportunities and constraints. Certainly, public infrastructure, public works-related infrastructure is both an opportunity and a constraint. We already have some built environment already. We have other portions of the area that we're talking about today that hasn't been built. It's simply just head marks on a map. Those are opportunities. There's a number of areas in between that haven't been looked at all. Those are also opportunities. So real quickly, what I'd like to do is identify those areas that do exist. Most of you know them already. But when you sit down with your plan, and you take a look in your breakout groups, take a moment to just look at the map. Familiarize yourself with the map, where the buildings are that you recognize, the open areas that you may recognize, and where some of these roads are and other existing infrastructure. Even just a couple minutes just to let that map soak in will help you as you go through your process. We're all familiar with South Kihei Road, PE Lining Highway. The other road is North-South Collector Road. Thanks, Joe. North-South Collector Road, which is a project that has received federal funding, will likely go out to construction in the November timeframe. We'll connect Kauai Street, which is the road that comes up from the Maui Dive Shop, and we'll go north to the Safeway site, past Road C, and farther north towards Kauai Street. Part of the Road C project is also Road C. And Road C connects PE Lining Highway and proceeds west all the way to South Kihei Road. And portions of that project will also include changing some of the signalization at South Kihei Road. So that's a major portion of infrastructure that really divides the planned area that you're looking at today. So get very familiar with Road C and the North-South Collector Road and how it facilitates movement within this area. Other projects that are either out to bid or have been bid on include the continuing process of getting South Kihei Road up to standards, if you will. Drainage improvements, curb gutter, sidewalk. Phase 2 and Phase 3 in particular will connect almost all the way up to LaPolla Street. Phase 4, which is, I believe, in design, takes from Lapoa Street and goes north. It won't change the alignment any, but it will get drainage up to standards and curb gutter sidewalk where we don't have it. Another major piece of infrastructure that David talked about was reclaimed water line. And the reclaimed water line comes from our treatment plant. It goes down the north-south collector road and provides either from a 12-inch, eventually down an 8-inch water line of reclaimed water. That water line will be used to hook up the schools, the pool site, the bike path, that Dave DeLeon mentioned, and Safeway at a minimum to start with. That's a major piece of infrastructure that's available for irrigation purposes in the area that you're going to be looking at today. The sewer situation is basically adequate at this point. It's just a matter of hooking up to it. Certainly the sewer should not drive your discussion today. Let's just assume that it works. You can make it work, okay? And the other two roads that are planned, we were talking about Road C, Kihei, Illinois, which is Road F. We might be wondering what happened to A, B, D, and E. Okay, Road A and B are in your planned area. They are the roads that I talked about are essentially just pen marks on a map at this point. They've been identified. They're general ideas in terms of where it might be. But you'll see Road A, which connects, well, Road B. Maybe I'll start with Road B, Joe. Road B goes from the north-south collector road down to South Kihei Road along the Meadowlands project. Okay. Road A bisects this area from Road B over to Lapoa Street and kind of hugs along the wetland areas. And so you'll see those on the map, and that's about as far along in development as they are, is what you see on the map. Okay? So those are opportunities. If the alignment doesn't look quite right or something else you'd like to see in there, that should be a subject of your discussion. And that pretty much does it for existing infrastructure and land infrastructure. I will be moving from group to group as you have your discussions, so if you have particular concerns regarding public infrastructure, public works related infrastructure, I'll be your person. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. We're right on schedule. Thank you. Good.
Okay, guys.
Introduce yourself, Joe.
Oh, yeah. My name is Joe Bertram. I'm the resident visionary, they say. I just wanted to introduce it and kind of put a disclaimer on that. We introduced some of these concepts to the landowners at a meeting held at the KC offices, one of them being Stuart Fern, who owns all the land over here. From here on up is the Fern property here. So they're a major player in this. He's been a resident or off and on resident here for about 50 years. And after I described everything, I showed him the slideshow that I'll be showing you folks. I asked for comments from the other landowners, and I had some questions and some people who weren't sure about what was happening. And then it got to Stuart, and he says, well, first of all, Joe, shut up. I said, oh, okay. He says, put your hands down. And he's a really old gentleman. He's about 75, 80 years old and very frail. But then he launched into this just wonderful, beautiful description of what he saw for this area. He talked about the beach reserve lands tying in with trails and in other ways, having a boardwalk along here into trails for bikes and pedestrians that would come through here, of fountains by the wetlands, of a civic building or a civic center that would really say what was here in Kihei and how this could all tie together with the pool and community complex, and then right up into the research and technology park, which is also planning a system of trails and walkways for the people up here. So it was really beautiful, and what he really left me with was, as he was leaving, and I think that's something that you might consider as well, is that he said, you know, they've had this land for 50, 60 years, and he always knew that it was going to be developed sooner or later. But what his really vision was he said that, you know, it's the beauty here. It's the beauty of this place will come through. He had great, just a faith that the beauty here will somehow come through. And just seeing all you folks here today, I believe that as well. That's really going to be our facilitating that beauty. It's not something we have to create. It's not something that we're going to have to invent. It's something that we're just going to finesse and enhance. So with that, we'll start here. Okay, now this slideshow was developed by a group called the Local Government Commission, which is a, somebody could hit these lights up here too, we appreciate it. This is based in California. They're a commission that set up to help facilitate community involvement in planning issues and in ways of getting people involved in deciding how to create a better community. And so what they did is they did this in response to the San Joaquin Valley, where they did over 3,000 interviews. They had 1,300 participants in a series of sub-regional community workshops. They had over 40 communities participate, over 800 respondents to another survey, and as a result of that, they came up with the issues and the concepts that you'll be seeing in the slideshow. And what is it that makes a community livable? You've heard that a lot today. You know, we want to make it more livable. Well, what does that mean? You know, do you provide blankets to everybody? Everybody gets a shoe, or what do you do to make a community more livable? Well. Most said, we want a sense of place. What creates a sense of place? Perhaps the best clue can be found in the images that most people that took this survey dislike. Now this is the image that received the most negative ratings. The people did not like strip development. It looks all the same no matter where you find it, and you can find it on South Kihei Road quite a lot. This image was also rated very negatively. Probably because it's designed only for the convenience of the car. You see, there's all the buildings at the back, and at the front is where all the cars are. The public realm, now that's something, it's another thing that you need to consider. The public realm, that is the area where we can be without laws, without rules, and that's our place. That's for everyone to be in. This is where the community happens. It does not exist here. This is just cars. This image also received negative ratings. The apartment complex is designed only for the convenience of the car. And I think what you're going to find is that, for the most part, what destroys a sense of place is the automobile, and planning just around only automobile traffic. It provides no feeling of community, no sense of place. So, one thing that really was very important was downtowns. People like successful downtowns. Downtowns that are a center for jobs, shopping, and entertainment. The majority of sites nominated as livable places were downtowns. Now, downtown Visalia won an award as a livable place. The downtown was transformed from a streetscape that resembled this, and I'm sure you've seen this on Maui as well, into a wonderful human-scale place where people can be found morning through evening, where there are places to work, to play, to eat, and to shop, as you can see with the trees and even play areas there. They also like downtowns that had places for people to gather. This is Hanford. It won an award for transforming their downtown into a place where people can go to for jazz concerts in the downtown park, and residents to walk and shop right nearby. Downtown Merced, another award winner, is the site of many locally owned businesses. So the attractive and popular downtown is not dominated by large chain stores, adding to the special sense of place. So that's an important consideration too, that the businesses that you locate in your downtown not be the chain stores that people have throughout the country, but as you encourage local businesses to establish themselves in there, so that then you know those people, and they're actually selling you stuff that is the stuff that you'd like. Another thing is that the mixed-use neighborhoods. One of the things that is really interesting is that we do have zoning, for the most part, is single-use zoning, where we have commercial, residential, industrial, so everything is separate, and then you have to get in your car and drive to each one of those things. Valley residents really like this visual image of a mixed-use building because they like the feeling of having housing above retail services. So you see you have retail, you have a deli, you have maybe a shoe store, whatever, and above that you have people living. This is what you call the old style. Also pocket parks. They're very popular. This image was one of the most highly rated. Parks like this one help bring people together on an informal basis to create a sense of community and a sense of place. So a pocket park can be any size. This one is a little bit more sizable. It's in a neighborhood, but it can be on a busy downtown street as well. Next is the shaded human-scale streets and boulevards. They do a lot to create a sense of place and are very important to the livability of a community. Now this is an award nominee in downtown Clovis. It exemplifies a beautiful street. You have the benches, you have of course, there's trees and the bushes, something that really makes you feel like it's almost your living room, which is important. The 4-lane street in downtown Merced keeps a human scale in the median strip, and shade trees. Narrow shaded trees are 10 degrees cooler on a hot day than places with wide, unshaded streets. One reason why they look and feel more livable. So that's very important, is shade. You need shade so people feel that they don't have to run into a store to get out of the sun. And then I like this picture because it also shows this very important element as well, some kind of a spire or something at your center of your community that says, here you are. You are now downtown. You are at your civic center. And you've seen these types of buildings elsewhere. Wailuku has their church, Kalamana Church. These are very important for people feeling like this is the place that I live. Next is transportation choices. Now, as you know, we are the only county without a bus system. I know we're working hard on it, but it's important that even as we work towards getting some kind of a transportation system, a mass transit system, that we plan our communities to accommodate mass transit, so that when we finally do get it in, it's done in the right way. Residents like to have other choices, such as using transit, riding a bike, or walking. Modesto's multimodal transit stop was chosen as a Livable Places award winner. This site is located adjacent to numerous destinations in Modesto's town. So they had a transit stop that brought in buses and other from all over the place, and they located it right there, right next to their downtown. So people felt very secure in coming to downtown that way. You need attractive, usable public spaces. Now, what are those? Well, here's one. This is Pioneer Square in Portland, Oregon. This was once a parking lot. They changed it into a transit area where buses come from all over. They also have bike and pedestrian paths that come into that area. And they have concerts here daily. And then so there's always activity going on. There's always people there. And then they go out and go shopping. So all the businesses around there really were impacted very favorably by this. You also need smaller kinds of things. This is McClatchy Square, located in downtown Modesto. And that is located adjacent to residential development. So you have a square or a circle that is adjacent to your downtown as a way of segueing into your residential area. And it gives people a chance to interconnect with each other, and again, in just an open and a beautiful spot. And sometimes it's something small like this. Now here it is right on a downtown street, and yet when a child gets tired or cranky and doesn't want to keep going shopping, you can just put them in the thing and forget about them. Well, no, sorry about that. But yes, I mean, it's important that we plan it so that people have fun when they go down there. This is what makes a community or even a downtown successful. You don't want them just to feel like they're just going to go down there, pick up a few things, and leave. The more you get people to stay, the more that they feel comfortable, the more that they're having fun, the more they're going to spend. Now, the steps to the future: redevelop and revitalize our downtowns and older neighborhoods. Now, for us, this means this area down here. The Zekas, the Star Market, the Lipoa Professional, for all these areas here need to be brought in to this whole downtown scheme of things. And there's a big challenge in that. And if anyone goes down there, you know that it isn't all connected. Each one of these things are separate. You can't get from here to here without getting in your car and driving around. You can't walk into these areas. They're all either walled off or there's different levels. So it's very important that we understand that this area needs to also be looked at as well as this area. So it's not just the undeveloped land. It's also the areas that are all part of this downtown area. That's what it's talking about. The next step is to retrofit placeless existing development, and I'm not naming names here. And then develop more livable new neighborhoods and business retail centers. So that's what this challenge is here. Now, there are a few other things that go along with this, and this is what's called the Awani principles. And what these were principles developed at the Awani Lodge over in Yosemite National Park. And these relate, I just took out the ones that relate to downtowns so that we can stick with what that is. Now, the reason, they say that most of the problems that have been created in our development is because of our extreme our reliance on the automobile as our main transportation choice. Over here is, this is just a whole bunch of countries, mainly in Europe, showing the modal split. This is the public transit here. This is walking bicycle. In most places, it's pretty even between walking bicycle and car and then transit. You know, all the transit's lower. This is the United States. 80% is in cars. You can just see, you know, where we stand. And it's not well, we don't. We sit in cars. And this is the result. This is the result. Here's a typical retail center, and you've seen them all. You know, there's Kalamanu and all the rest of it. It's just a single-use retail, and it's surrounded by parking. And this is what you get to get people there. These huge arterials with intersections that no pedestrian in their right mind would try to cross. And it was pointed out too that these people here cannot even get to. This is all walled off. You know, just to get a loaf of bread from any one of these wonderful little places here, they basically have to get into the suburban, you know, assault vehicle and come out and to there. So again, you're encouraging more just cars more than people. So now one of the first principles is all planning should be in the form of complete and integrated communities containing housing, shops, workplaces essential to the daily life of the residents, and community size should be designed so that housing, jobs, daily needs, and other activities are in easy walking distance of each other. And we were fortunate in that that's the way Kihei has developed, because we have established that there'll be four nodes along this long linear thing, and this is the downtown node. Here's all the housing over here, which will be connected by this greenway. So these are all very walkable. Anywhere that you're here and where the existing housing is and where the housing is coming in, this area here is within a 10-minute walk. So we're already on a good spot with that. Now this is what this represents basically a village in Europe, and it shows a walkable mixed-use community. Residents can easily walk to most services, and stores are essential to their daily needs. The high level of activity makes it a popular place to be. People like being where other people are, and they like seeing other people having fun. So this is what gives a community its vitality and its sense of place. This is Ferndale, California. Most communities that were built before 1945, World War II, are basically based on these principles. And ones that have been preserved have actually become tourist attractions. And so this is what you see in Lahaina, you also see it in Paia, you see it in Makawao. People like to live that way. Another one is as many activities as possible should be located within easy walking distance of transit stops. This is a transit stop, again, in Portland, Oregon. Over 34% of the people that come in to Portland, Oregon come through transit, and everything is in easy walking distance of this stop. Also, again, that you actually do have some kind of a mixed use. You see here we have housing, and it's above shops. If you mix the use, people who don't walk, who don't drive, especially older folks and stuff like that, they love this type of housing. This means that they don't have to worry about an MEO bus coming late. Another one, the location and character of the community should be consistent with a larger transit network, and the community should have a center focus that combines commercial, civic, cultural, and recreational uses. Now, we're really ahead of the game on this one. Our mayor was very good in putting our community center and our pool right down in here. So we have some cultural, recreational uses and some civic uses already planned in here. And we have our post office down here. We also have the DMV offices down here. So we already have a lot of the things coming in that could actually make this quite a center and a center focus. This is a town that's very basic on the mainland, where you have a town square which is bounded by businesses all the way around it, and then you have your civic building in the middle of it. This is something we may consider for our downtown, something very traditional in that sense. A community should contain an ample supply of specialized open space in the form of squares, greens, and parks whose frequent use is encouraged through placement and design. Public spaces should be designed to encourage the attention and presence of people at all hours of the day and night. We want to make this a 24-hour town. This is what keeps it alive, what keeps it vital, and keeps it safe. When people feel safe that they can come down and be part of a downtown, they'll be there. Now here's a typical building that's been built here on Maui a lot. You might even see it at the Research and Technology Park. It creates space that they take up space. They don't create space. There's all this green area here. You'll never see someone out there on a picnic. You know, it's like, it's just empty and it will never be used by the public. And as a result of that, what we have is, this is what they call the Levi Strauss. What they did is they created space. They didn't want to build up to the street, so they built around this square. And they created this public space for people to use. And this was Levi Strauss Square. It's become a very, very popular spot. People come there all hours of the day and night, as well as on weekends. And it's really improved as well as enhanced the neighborhood it's in. And as far as business climate, it's gone way up. Businesses have really benefited from having this there. Again, it's a little faded, but it's the same concept again. You have housing up here. You even have like an outdoor seating area where people can look down on the people that are down here. So they know that there's eyes on the street at all times. So they feel safe while they're out there, no matter what hour of the day they're there. Notice that the design of community streets and paths should encourage pedestrian and bicycle use by being small and spatially defined by buildings, trees, and lighting, by discouraging high-speed traffic, and by contributing to a system of fully connected and interesting routes to nearby destinations. Now that's really important, that they be not only fully connected, but interesting. You don't want to just have a sidewalk. This is a housing development in California that put in this is their roadway, and this is their bike pedestrian paths that run behind all the houses. They connect with each path, and then they connect to a wider distribution system that takes them off into the countryside. So, I mean, we can develop this way. We can give people choices. We can put a park within 5 minutes, within steps of everybody's front stoop. It's not impossible. Next is, this is in Davis, California. They have one of the biggest bike pedestrian routes in the country, really. They just parks go through all the linear parks that connect with other linear parks, and over 25% of all of their trips are by bike or walking. Wherever possible, the natural terrain, drainage, and vegetation of the community should be preserved, with superior examples contained within parks or green belts. The community design should conserve resources and to minimize waste. And communities should provide for the efficient use of water through the use of natural drainage, drought-tolerant landscaping, and recycling. Now, this is important. Many people talk about Wailea as being very beautiful. It is, but it's different. It's not the forest or the plants that were here when they got here. They created something different, and it takes a lot of water. 60% here in Kihei of the potable water we use is for irrigation. And that's, you know, in Wailuku, it's 25%. And so we use way too much water for watering our plants. Materials and methods of construction should be specific to the region, exhibiting continuity of history and culture, and compatibility with climate. Again, as David was saying, most people don't think that Kihei has a climate or a culture, but we do. It's the Hawaiian culture. It was here, there were Hawaiians living here, and we need to research that a little bit more and bring that element into our downtown. This is in Santa Fe, so they use the natural, the native cultures types of building there, and it creates a sense of place. You know you're in Santa Fe when you see these buildings. You know you're in New Mexico because of the way the buildings are shaped and the way they're placed. And then they even had some newer buildings that really reflected that same type of thing. And here I was talking about drought-tolerant landscaping. This is in Palm Springs, California. These are the types of medians that we should be having because they use over 70% less water than typical landscaping uses. And it also is very beautiful, and it also reflects the character of where they're at. They're in a desert. We're in a desert. It can reflect that. Rather than allowing developer-initiated piecemeal development, local governments should take charge of the planning process. General plan should designate where new growth, infill, or redevelopment will be allowed to occur. Well, folks, this is what this conference is about today. Is instead of just waiting for somebody to come along and propose something and then pick it apart or oppose it, we can, as through our local government, this planning department has done this, take charge of the planning process. It's a new concept. Prior to any development, a specific plan or precise plan should be prepared based on these planning principles. And that's what we're talking about here again, is we're trying to prepare a precise, specific plan that you can see, that we're actually going to color in and mark up. And so when a developer comes to develop our downtown, we'll have already made all the decisions about where it's to go, what it's to look like, and what the final product's going to be. Now this is where they did it on the mainland. Here was an existing downtown, looks very similar to ours. You know, just shopping malls, strip development through this type of a process where the community got together and decided what they wanted, and computer simulation, they filled it in. Now you can see where they brought all the buildings up to the front. They created a sense of place. They have a median going down the middle with trees, and all the buildings now face on and they're very interesting buildings too. So we can do the same. This was a redevelopment of a Safeway store in San Diego. All those buildings you see up front there used to be, not a Safeway store, I'm sorry, but a Sears, 40-acre Sears store, which was developed into what you see there, which looks just like a neighborhood. And this is another shot of it. That's the Ralph's supermarket in the back there. Okay. And so it's basically, the way we can do it is we need to do it in an open process, and it's a process that we will provide visual models of all planning proposals. Again, that brings us back to today. We are in this open process. It's an open meeting. We're asking everyone to really put your thinking caps on and start just get those creative juices flowing, because what will come out of this will be a visual model that we'll be able to take to the next step. So thanks very much. I hope I gave you some ideas about what we can do today, and let's get started. Oh, and there's a question over here.
I was just curious, is there actually a plan to have a public transportation on the island of Maui ever in the future? I mean, how often you have it? And you've just given 10 or 20 good reasons why we ought to have it too. I was just wondering, is it in the cards? Or?
Well, the main thing I'm showing it for, because as any part of our planning process, we need to plan for it. So we need just to assume that it will happen, but right now there's no. There is no plan for it, okay? So now I'll hand it over to the professionals. Chris.
Fantastic, Bill. Do we have the lights back on? Good. Dave and I are just going to set the stage a little bit for our charrette. And I think Joe has definitely given us a lot of food for thought and shown you all how this can happen. And I'd just like to start off by looking at this base map that we're all going to have. It's scale 1 inch equals 200 feet. And it was prepared by Clifford Mukai of Mori Engineering. And it's important from the point of view that it shows essentially the existing development, and it shows the opportunities that could be available in terms of areas that are not developed. One point I'd just like to make right now in terms of a detail, Road C, everybody calls it Road C. It's now called Pi'ikea Avenue, and the north-south collector is now called Liloa Drive. I think those are really great names. Hokulani Holt Padilla was involved with Peter Baldwin and the street naming committee, and I think they're nice additions as far as names to our community. Also, I really wanted to identify to you the fact that, as I indicated before, Kihei is a very linear community, and it has a place of beginning in the north, and it starts at what I'm going to call Kealia Village, and that this is the second important village, and for today at least, and I don't care if it becomes forever, Lipoa village, but at some point it needs its own identity and its own name as part of the overall fabric of Kihei as a city or as a town. We call it Kihei Town. And again, of course, then we would have Kalama Village and then Kamaole Village. The important point is that this Kihei Road and this Pi'ilani Highway don't become a repeat of Route 66 outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, that David and I drove up and down. That it becomes essentially a drive that would give you basically a point of arrival, let's say, at Kealia Village. And then after the commercial development in that area, you would have a sense of leaving, and you'd have a sense that the scale gives you a little breadth in terms of the residential character of the scale and the character of development. And then you drive along and you come to some kind of definite sense of a gateway, a point of arrival at Lipoa Village. In other words, it's very important to have this sense of entering in, a sense of identity of arrival, a sense of also departure and arrival from the south. And I believe also that there needs to be something at the intersection of Pi'ilani Highway that would distinguish it. We all see Pi'ilani Village, I think it is, the Baldwin Pacific Project, or Malama Pacific Project, how nice the entrance is along Pi'ilani Highway. Also, I think it's very important to realize that, again, in the context of this linear community that we have, that we also have the Ahupua'a that goes Mauka and Makai. So we have this character of going Mauka and Makai. We have this large kind of civic center here with a lot of different uses in it. Up above, Pi'ilani Highway, we have the golf course, and we have another very important park type of business industrial area called the Research and Technology Park. It's a great asset in this particular area of Kihei. And eventually, with the new master plan, it's going to be a great, an exciting place to go to and to be part of. But it's important in the planning to realize that this is an edge that needs to be stabilized. It would be a tragedy to allow commercial development to continue north from this area, from Lipoa Village. It would be a tragedy to allow commercial development to continue south and join up with Kalama Village. It's not the way it should happen. In order for Kihei to maintain its sense of identity, its sense of place, we need to define these neighborhood or village areas, these business sites, and keep them and maintain them and allow them to grow and develop within themselves. If there's a need for more land or for more commercialization, if we decide that, then perhaps we should think about increasing the density a little bit and allowing for redevelopment of some of the projects that have existed over time. But it's not the answer to just continue to sprawl, okay? The other thing is I just want to point out is that in the context of our community, in the context of the sense of community, Joe talked about important assets like the Village Green, and we can all kind of reflect back to Vermont and the kind of really nice, pleasant kind of park-like experience that exists with the town square and all the buildings around it. That's really great. Right down here in Kihei today, if you go to Azeka Shopping Center, Azeka 2, you'll see that Junior Achievement has taken over the front part of the parking lot. And they have an activity. They've kicked out all the cars. And they've got something going on there that's a community kind of an event. And I think that's important. Maybe there's a place along South Kihei Road where there could be somewhat of a green. It might not be that, it might not be a matter of taking something away. It might be a matter of essentially changing its use as it really relates immediately to Kihei Road, South Kihei Road. The other thing is that I believe from the point of view of the qualities that we're talking about, they're all here on Maui. If we go to Lahaina and we look at the Banyan Courtyard, it's a village green. If we walk up down Front Street, it's a very active commercial area. The scale is such that it really feels good. If we go to Makawao, Baldwin Avenue, Makawao Avenue, we go to Paia, Hana Highway, Baldwin Avenue, Same kinds of feelings we go to Wailuku, the same kind of thing exists on a larger scale. All of our communities need care. All of our communities need the input of our concern, and this is what we're here today to actually show that we care and to actually work together to make this a better place. Now, Dave, you want to add a little bit?
Thanks, Chris. We're within 5 minutes of our schedule, which is really doing pretty well. But here's my suggestion as we break up into the groups, and John's going to give you the more detailed instructions. But a lot of you aren't going to know each other. It's a new process, and I was thinking maybe we'd start with some sort of general discussion about a downtown, and I'm referring to item number 3, downtown visioning, on the first page of your outline. I've always been drawn to downtowns, and I don't know why. I was a kid raised in the north end of Seattle, and the big deal every Saturday was to get on the bus and go downtown to First Avenue, which at that time was kind of a sleazy area, the Skid Road area. But it was just fascinating. There was people down there, and there was drunks, and you could see all this stuff. And I got caught shoplifting, and my mom wouldn't let me go after that. But my idea of a perfect vacation is to go to a city. I don't want to go to lakes. I don't want to go out in the mountains. I go to cities and I just walk, whether it's Denver or Boston or Palo Alto or Eugene, and just see what people have done to their downtowns. And it's, to me, trying to articulate that. I don't know what it is that draws you there, and some you don't want to go, and some you just want to walk around all afternoon. Spend a little time when you're getting in your group. What is it downtown? Is it where the biggest bank is, or the biggest statue, or the biggest library? What is it that makes people come there and know when they're there? You never go and see something that says you are now in the middle of downtown, but you just know it whenever you go to a city. And you know where people have gone and rejuvenated their downtowns. We're kind of lucky because it's largely unbuilt out here, so we have a little bit of an advantage of not having to go into an area that's already built. So I think that would be an important discussion, and the basic question is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Why are we all here? What's wrong? I mean, it's nice, it's sunny. What is it that we're trying to change, what is the goal we're trying to work towards? If you don't clearly understand that in your group, then the 2 hours are going to be kind of unfocused. To help you a little bit on the next page, I just listed, and you don't have to talk about any of these or all of them, but it's just kind of a way of all the different elements that you may want to look at. And I picked up a couple just in the discussion this morning. One on circulation. What about a park and ride, or what about a bus stop? Maybe we don't have a bus stop now, but in 10 years, do people have to stand on the side of the road in some little bench, or is there actually going to be an area where a bus could pull off in the shade and you could, have an area to park your car, do that? Think about that now. Think about what would have happened in many communities, particularly the suburban communities, if they had thought about that 20 or 30 years ago. So that's an idea that came up. The other one was building and zoning codes. I was thinking of putting it at number 9, and I just plain forgot about it. I used the example of Dobie Gillis, and everybody laughs because no one remembers who Dobie Gillis is. But they lived on top of their store. It was a nice kind of middle class, and what's wrong with people living on their store? They're there all day long. They don't have to commute at the end of the day. They care about what's going on in their community. What is it about our zoning codes? We have 37 different types of zoning areas. What is so complicated about life on Maui that it has to be chopped up into 35 different pods? I mean, it doesn't make any difference. Why can't we live and work and intermingle and walk around in a community? So let's look at our zoning and building codes. And the last one that Joe pointed out, number 10, is focal points in buildings. So often, a major church or a library or something, there's something that defines that core, that vision of a downtown. I don't think we have that here, but maybe that's a place where the public building could come in, a town center or a civic center, something like that. So anyway, this is just kind of a checklist, but I helped. And one other quick point. Malls have gone out of fashion, but they were the big thing in the 60s and the 70s, and Fort Street Mall is a prime example. In the period I've been in Hawaii, it's about 25 years, 3 times they have gone into Fort Street Mall and redone it with landscape architects and fancy benches and fancy light bollards and all that. And you go to the north end of the mall, or whatever north is, and there's still homeless people there. It's still weird. No one goes there after 5 o'clock at night. So all the planning, all the nice design, all the streetscape, all the things we're talking about never really changed the feel of that upper part of that Port Street Mall. It's still kind of creepy. The businesses are still boarded up. So in your discussion, don't get overly focused on drawing trees. You know, that's not what changes the community. That's not what makes it economically viable. So are you just creating a place where everybody leaves at 5 and then the homeless people have a comfortable place to spend the night? The social problems, the financial problems that go into a downtown have to be talked about. So don't focus just on physical design and architecture. So that's all I really wanted to say. We've got an awful lot of topics to talk about, but again, that whole why are we here, who cares, what is a downtown anyway, I think is a very important discussion to start the process off. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Min, who's going to give us the real detailed instruction. And I assume you're going to start off and tell us what a charrette is. It's one of those French words, and I don't know. Okay, I'm going to segue over to John.
Thank you, David.
How do you turn this off?
I think the presenters this morning have done a very, very good job in providing information. How about giving them a hand? I hope you have enough to think about, because we're going to enter the next phase of this program, which is the charrette, and that's a small group discussion.
Since we've indicated that we're now at 1 hour and 20 minutes instead of, what were we before, 2 hours? Could you, yeah, okay. But if John's going to run through the times, I think it'd be important not only to have, you know, somebody's going to be doing the design graphic documentation and someone that's going to be taking notes, but have somebody else be a timekeeper, okay? Because what happens in these things is that you get to the end, you only got 5 minutes to kind of identify, you know, what you're proposing. Okay. All right.
I'm Becky Collins. Hi, Becky. Hi. Are you related to Yes, I'm Hi, I'm Becky Collins.
John Seeley.
Hi there, Pat the Blossom.
Okay.
What I want to know is which question.
Yeah. Is that clear? Is that clear?
He's narrow-minded.
Okay.
Would you mind talking to him, because he's going to drink in a minute, so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we need to identify our timekeeper. It seems like you're
I'll be a timekeeper.
okay.
I'll be a timekeeper.
A recorder.
Yeah, really.
For the future.
No, I'm not going to help. Oh, you're a floater. Okay.
Yeah, I got my bad knee.
Okay, let's start.
Well, I got my bad height.
Want to be timekeeper? Right.
But I'm fine.
Land use commission may take that up.
Somebody. I know constantly.
Jason? All the time, and that's how the parents got to know each other, because they take their kids, go to the park and meet and get to know each other.
She has a no.
Can we start with maybe just
Yeah, I was going to. Yeah, exactly right.
like
on these kind of items, the general things.
Yeah.
Use any tool. My suggestion: use any tool you have to express yourself.
I was thinking maybe do the concepts, like you're talking about the broad brush, and then lay that on the canvas, so to speak.
Basically, I'd say is introduce yourselves. Let's find out what kind of expertise we bring.
And I'm in this group to help if we need any kind of design drawings clarified or to be able to figure out some scale things or whatever. But I also have had some extensive experience in town planning on the East Coast.
Fantastic.
Yeah, right.
And I'm very interested in what's happening here and where it's going.
Robert Friedman.
The other was 45.
He's gonna come and tell us. Could maybe stand and kneel on.
And so, basically, we're all sitting right about here, right? This is the Guy Institute. This is the Project District 5, the Ball and Malama Project District up here. The high-tech park is up there. Stars of Market St. Teresa's here. Azeka's and Azeka's too.
So if we take those,
The firm property, we talked about two firms. This is Azeka's firm. And so this is
children
that's going to be an issue to get into what is downtown and what is opportunity.
The children and all the people that are involved in getting kids to and from school, bus drivers, parents, whatever, it just can become quite a mess.
In other words, there shouldn't be trucks going up and down.
That's a general question, especially the residents of Kihei. You know, we saw this, you know, traffic is one of the biggest concerns for us in Kihei because I believe it's a mess. And it's because it was built in the 50s and 60s, and you know, we just kept adding on. And
I think you're right.
Part of the problem was this landowner owns this much, so he builds just his cul-de-sac. The next guy owns this much, he builds a cul-de-sac. Just in recent years, I traveled through Mainland a lot, and what we saw was major thoroughways with an exit going off into a project area, and then all the internal roads would be there. When they would come out of one or two exits from their big project. Is that something the Kihei residents would like to see, or do they like to see all these roads going throughout the Kihei versus maybe a major road here with a stub and it services this whole district? So that traffic would speed up here versus having, you know, you see Azeka's and other places where every 50 feet there's an intersection.
Entryways and then expressways and then...
And the sense of the neighborhood itself being free from the impact of the heavy traffic flow.
This particular village is unique to Kihei in that we're trying to create the downtown, so to speak. I mean, that we got to keep that, I think, is a major consideration of what we're doing today. Is we're trying to create a sense of the downtown area and get a focus for Kihei.
For the center, the core of the safe tax was the corner of the Toa, that piece of land that appears to have gone belly up, putting a park in it, an open space park, running a boardwalk from that far south. Recycled plastic, running parallel.
I think it's my understanding that's why we're here today, is we've got those focal points that if they're not here already in the school, the existing commercial church, that sort of thing, we've got additional magnets, if you will, that will attract people in our civic area.
I'm thinking even beyond that. I'm thinking more of like Lahaina. Lahaina has the concept of the whalers village. People go there and think of this was the whaler. You know, the historical historically, Kihei would bring us here.
You know, if we have defined an Apuaha, then we definitely have roots. Because the Queen and the King of only gave Apuaha to very special people. Apuaha is what was the way that we divided land prior to going through the traditional American way.
They're different in this group. Oh, okay, so they will be reserved.
They are open space on the proposed right?
Walkways could be put in there.
Well, that's part of what this is about. Is that right now, this is what the pattern of development is on the new community plan. How you implement that, how you make that real, is part of when you get into zoning and when you get into design. And so that's kind of the things we want to look at here, visioning on, well, how do you deal with these two wetlands as well as the wetlands here? How do you deal with all of this commercial? Because it goes up into here where the Safeway is going to be. That's commercial, even though it shows project district, it's commercial. This is the community center, this is the school. You know, how do you integrate that?
And geographically, that's a huge distance. So how you create a focal point and help people move in this area is going to be a challenge.
The movement, that flow that people have been talking about.
Commercial and retail activity is here, and that's a limited draw.
Well,
but
and over
this
here.
is going to be, a more focal point in my mind.
And I'm tracking the same way as you are, and my thing is, okay, where are the people in Kihei coming from, and where do you state the entrance? Are they coming from the airport and they need to know when they've reached here? Are they coming from other parts of the little Kihei areas that they need to know when they've reached this section? And so that my entry would tend to say right here. But if you're looking at where everybody in the area is coming from, it's probably 50-50 coming from either side, which would put you back here, which would put this as a focal point.
I wonder what would be the percentage of people who would enter the area on Piolani Highway versus South Kihei Road.
Depends on which way they have to turn.
Exactly.
Yes, so it's a left turn or not.
See, it goes back to that turn.
Oh, there probably will be, but I think this is going to be closed off.
No,
No, it is not.
Stays open.
Right.
Fancy weapon. So North-South Collector runs right through here.
Now, is that for cars or bicycles?
It can be both.
Oh, I see.
I mean, it's intended to be a road, but it's undeveloped, so you can pretty much come up with what you believe it should be.
From this wetland behind St. Teresa's Church up here to the schools. So now we've got, if we follow through on that vision, we essentially have 3 legs of an intentional pedestrian loop. We've got a shoreline trail, we have a wetlands boardwalk that ends at the schools, we have a pedestrian bike trail that leads from the schools down past the community center and pool towards, eventually towards the youth center. And with, and then on your property, Betzel's property, which is a little farther down, where's yours?
It's way off, yeah, we're way off.
Yeah, but essentially, as you go down, there's another gulch that has the potential to be turned into a pedestrian access that leads back down from the bikeway to the shore and ends up at the whale sanctuary. So, I mean, we already have the embryonic beginnings of a full-size pedestrian loop with this downtown vision pretty much at its heart.
So you wish to bring the pedestrian?
Right. What would mark the downtown? That's like yes. I mean, how do you know that?
But how? What distinguishes it?
It's like a road.
How about having the cars like a bell goes on?
Little electric strip on the street.
What about a road?
I think if you enter Kihei from Kihei Road, you have a sense of getting into Kihei, and this is it. If you come Piilani Highway, there is nothing that tells you where you are, because there's here and there, and they're kind of off the road.
Have you ever been to Elkton, Wyoming? You know you're in Elkton, Wyoming because there's a huge arch made of elk horns.
Oh, here we go.
Just makes you out of coral or
You do something vertical instead of.
They've already got this as commercial. Bring it all the way down. This is what color? Multifamily.
That's what's there
Well,
now.
well, this is already here.
Right, that's the complex behind Star.
Multifamily, it's the apartments back here, it's still commercial. This is
If we start talking about another major green space on here, I don't feel like the county's going to have the monies to do it, so we're talking about something that probably isn't economically feasible to do. We want to try to, keep a practical stance while we're setting our goals here, and we just want to be as creative as possible. I think we're more productive if we try to plan for practical things that we can actually, are feasible of implementing.
I think that I'd like to add one thing. I think what I saw, I just got back from Laguna, California, where there were flowers all over the place, and it was just absolutely a beautiful community. I would like to say beautiful community, beautiful downtown in terms of what the ambiance is. And I think we need to capsulize what you were saying in terms of the environmental corridor. Can you give us a few words on that before we leave the goals?
What about green? So it requires water and attention. And this is one of the things that's really failing in this community. Nothing.
These businesses are more approachable. It's not like a big corporate headquarters where you get a glass door and you feel like you're intimidated to go in. These are more approachable type of
Yeah, like you showed up there with, you have a big, beautiful building, but you got all this land that's non-usable.
No, what we might do, we might want to encourage discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like a promenade.
yeah.
They did that in Boulder. When we lived there, you could park cars, but now you can't. It's just pedestrian.
Well, Dad lived right behind Star Market, so I walk all that area. No problem.
It's hard though.
Pardon?
It's hard to work there. The traffic, there's...
No, I just walk.
Oh,
Go with the traffic light.
Wait the traffic.
I wait. Well, and one of my neighbors was the one that.
For our goal-setting purposes.
All right, let's.
So
Yeah.
if we want to get some more things on this paper, we need to do that in 2 minutes.
How about safety? Is a goal? That would be a goal, wouldn't it?
There was park in a basin coming in here, but if you're looking for a focal point, and you're wanting to say, okay, this is what we want or this is what we need, and maybe we can't have it, but this is our idea, then this is the forum to present that. And if what you're thinking is something that, and Avery's point is well taken, is you have to take into consideration what the landowner has or wants or needs. But we have the opportunity to kind of put that aside and say, this is what the community wants or needs. And then to deal with that in kind of a more broad scope than we would otherwise be able to.
Right
And
now,
yet it seems like in a lot of ways the communities that we've been talking about, Mako, Paia, already have something that Kihei really needs. So in a way, I think Kihei is trying to catch up to what they already have.
That's true.
Okay. Any other goals that we want to identify before we move on to trying to define the elements of our
Just
vision?
add one last one, maybe. In regard to keeping the wetlands and the idea of the little parks and stuff like that, just to sort of incorporate natural terrains and natural topography, so that the things sort of don't become forced into place, but rather sort of evolve.
Oh, the natural topography. The natural topography and what again?
Well, the wetland areas.
Okay.
I think it's really important to, the adage of don't mess with Mother Nature is really important, especially
I
here.
would feel funny kind.
However, I'm not sure how it's going to look at the rest of it.
But that's part of your open spaces when they're talking about divisions between areas. I mean, when we're looking at this area, he's right there on the edge. His orchard, that gives a beautiful break to transition.
Which will help pull your traffic away from this road and let the kids walk right across the street. Make this a bike path.
Ironically, originally this plan was to dead end Lapoa, which I don't know why they didn't do that.
They didn't do it because the federal government wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't give the matching funds because the road curved too much.
I had a feeling when I first saw this plan, where the road comes in here and they turn right in here, that there's going to be a lot of backup.
I think it's going to be really
Back
rough.
here, it's going to be a...
See, this road was going
You mean like
to,
when
this
they're
road, see, was going to come like this and come across.
Well, it's now and the future.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean the beginning of it. It's going to begin in the next year or two, and we'll go on for several years. I think if we begin to get into things that require the destruction of massive amounts of the community, we're not going to be realistic.
And that's what this would
What can be done?
Well, exactly, and so what you're presenting is really looking at the constraints that we'll have as well as the opportunities. So the opportunity is the immediacy of what's going to be
It's
coming
going
up.
to be fairly immediate. Because there could be another plan maybe off into the future, 50 years from now, when you would decide to take much of the plan down. That's what you would have to do for this ocean-oriented.
Discussed it internally, if this could be blocked off or restricted in such a way to essentially force more traffic over here.
Right, because what we're talking about is you have a great possibility for a sense of community right here with schools and the community center facing one another if you don't have cars carrying.
Keep in mind that the school does like to have a variety of exits for emergency purposes, so it's important to them that they can get out with recent fires.
Right, but see, they're going to have, this is going to be here.
What if you come up to here for access to your center and your school, but you dead end it from here to Piolani?
Right.
But that's the only purpose of this roadway would be to go into these two places.
Continue the road right across.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, just stop them right here.
Yeah.
Is that still a possibility?
This area is going to be upset, not being able to get there.
So we can include that as
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
The concept that we heard, from Chris, where he was talking about it would be a tragedy if this happened, or it would be a tragedy if we allowed commercial sprawl to occur, you know, throughout the Kihei area. Is that something that you agree with, or is that something you disagree with? Is there a way to enhance what we have here as the central core?
I think that was probably the most key thing he said. You know, I mean, to establish these nodes, local points.
Okay, so
you let go of that, you don't have, it's gone.
In the landscaping, you conceal a lot of this by sort of hiding the areas which are less appealing to like the auto parts store, which is going to have parking, that sort of thing.
I think that our dependency on cars has to do with our lifestyle. That is, we try to spend as little time as possible not having fun. Sometimes we have work or whatever that we don't particularly enjoy, and so we can get through that if we can, and then we get home or wherever to play. And the whole parking lot thing, where I want to be in my, I want to get out of my car, I want to be in the store, I want to get out and go home. And so that's something that we just need to realign in terms of, that's the opportunity to realign it, but then the merchants are going to say, yeah, right, I'm going to bulldoze my parking lot. So that's something to think about too, is how, you know, how do we reorient that? If everybody so far has been going this way to get into the store, how do we get them to come this way?
So how do we...
Difficult to get to here.
Yeah,
Here.
and I don't
This
think
is
we
a
should
more
worry about what.
centralized area.
I think you should keep it on one side of the road. I think it's nice that, I mean, if you could do it, to take a whole corner and have it all be a green corner or something like that. But I think for use-wise,
You'd have to have things going over the roads or something so people wouldn't get.
But yeah, for use, I think it would be better on one side or the other.
All the public parks in this area would be very well. Go on here about what are we going to do with the cars, so I had to go to that meeting. And out of that came, let's establish an interim road north-south so that the traffic can be disseminated that way. And then from that came a suggestion from somebody out in the crowd that said, when this all happens, when we get this circulation thing, then let's make Kihei Road one way so that we can take the traffic off the Kihei Road and put it back where it belongs for the pedestrian.
They were talking about where you have Island Surf, you have the first 2 floors which are businesses, and then the top 4 floors which are residents.
And continuing to invite participation of the kids involved, the students.
So this just so you're saying, look at this as a first step, as part of identifying the values.
Another group, when we come to our reporting portion, so we can kind of talk about what we've done. Is there anybody that would like to volunteer to be the spokesperson for this group?
Wasn't it going to go
right in here. It's supposed to go back there. Maybe it would be up here or something.
This is key to the whole thing too, because a lot of people that use that would be a
Yeah.
central hub.
I think the post office, the banks, the grocery store, the Long's Drug, I really feel that if this were a place where you could park your car and you wanted to walk through this whole area rather than, you know, park your car at Long's and then drive to the post office, I think that if this were more user friendly, then more people
I agree.
would do it.
It wasn't designed that way, because you've got to walk where the cars drive. You got to walk.
Right.
Let me show you one thing we got right now. We got our greenway going right down to a dead end that you cannot go anywhere on a bicycle. On South Kihei Road.
Right down here, you're saying.
There's no place to ride a bicycle down there. You're either on the sidewalk or cars are zooming right past you. So
What about continuing it through and then you're able to go on the back roads?
Well, that's
a parking lot. Is that a major change that needs?
Yeah, but we're planning for the future.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
All right,
we're
I'm just
saying,
thinking, no, we
yeah,
want to get through a parking lot, that's
yeah,
all.
no, but if we can take one of your greenways, I mean, the bikeway doesn't have to be 14 feet wide.
Correct.
It can be, 8 feet wide. So if we can take a path and put it down
okay,
to...
so that opens up that area down there, but we still have nothing accessing this way.
Because you're right, it is a problem.
It's going to even out the traffic a little bit, especially around school time. People are going to drive down the school buses or people pick up their kids.
This will take off the
So it's going to take, it's going to
alleviate,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
exactly. I'm going to look at my watch. I'm going to say, it's like, I am not.
Or have a different,
Exactly.
it's almost
We've
like having
identified,
another
let's say
entrance.
this is the major road.
You have to close this.
We have to make some assumptions.
Yeah.
Well, let's start looking back at the downtown area. Maui has always said, we'll make the bike path follow the road. And many times it's not safe for parents to take their kids along the road.
I think the question, Kimo, that's going to come up along the shoreline is environmental issues.
You can
there's
set
a
it back
whole
from the
lot.
shoreline.
If you, where there is.
How about utilizing this road and coming through here?
It could meander along
Yeah.
there.
If you could
We're
make
talking
it,
about something like the boardwalk that runs along all the hotels in Wailea. That's a wonderful, it's
They
a
built that when
beautiful
they built the
walk.
hotel.
They rollerblade, they ride their bikes, they jog.
But
Yes.
it has to be inland enough that we don't have the problems with the eroding. There are places where there really are environmental constraints.
Sidewalks are.
But I think what Heritage Corridor is working on is that concept, but acknowledging that there are going to be places where there are environmental constraints, and you choose protecting the shoreline over hardening it with any kind of structure like that. And those are the places where you then start looking at, okay, how do we route people out to maybe broader landscape sidewalks on Kihei Road? How do we route that?
That goes over that big
Height,
berm, that big,
so
what would you guys like to see up here, the residents of Kihei?
You could put a rough bridge over
They
it.
used to have some sort of
There's a big building right here.
Does the Heritage Corridor?
like you might have an area that the school children do wetland stewardship.
Right.
Okay, you have an outage regularly by the kids. One of the Malamaula is looking for a new canoe club site. That's possible for this area. But the idea being, when you walk into this stretch of preserves, what you feel like you are in is a preserve. Right in the heart of your downtown, you have a beach that your community
And we
has
can
preserved.
view it as we drive into the community.
Right. So instead of a sense of, I'm coming down to Atlantic City to get on the boardwalk, you get a great sense of, I'm coming into a coastal community, and the first shoreline that you're aware of is one that the community is protecting.
Say for instance, because which is right here, like these are all like one big development area, right? It's just designated as commercial. So what you're saying is try to break that up somewhat, so that you don't get this just long.
When you think about the town of Waiduku, if you wanted to get from one place to another, you could figure out 10 different ways to get there. Whereas in this particular case, you may have only one or two.
You can actually go into Kilohano, yeah. I mean and none of the others look like that. So there's something wrong with the picture that if we have to have parking lots, which we all do because we're driving, that they have huge covers, shade covers all over them. So that it really drops the temperature.
Are you jumping around a lot?
Yes. No, this is a brainstorming.
I turn around and the subject changed.
That's what we're okay.
Okay. Let me drop back to, there was a suggestion, I think they were talking about different logos for different parts of the community, and I'd really rather not do that. We already have too much fractionalization, so I'd like to see this combined.
I'd like to see a sunset with a whale in the distance.
That's a possibility.
Or something.
Something that I had conjured up a long time ago, which I haven't worked on, is our location with respect to the geographical appearance of the island, And I always looked at this place as being, Kihei as being the heart of Maui. Just the way the island looks, we're situated where the heart is. Okay?
Landscaping, lighting, street furniture. Well, we talked street furniture. We were talking about covered benches.
Well, what about landscaping? I'd like to recommend that we avoid what happened at that little parking lot across from
M3.
Well, there was, right up where people park at Charlie Young Beach. They put that famous parking lot in, and they had to take the trees down and put up new trees, take them down again, put in, because this is serious. This is taxpayer money, and we had to.
What about the wetlands?
Some are called meadowlands.
For landscaping, maybe?
All of these belongs off Kihei Road or what?
Not necessarily. I just think that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 aspects of ground, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you could, I think these two side by side, I don't like either of them. I'd rather come in back here.
This one existing park. Continue the spine down to link up all this.
Integration.
So we have park space that joins up with public facility. Okay? This becomes support facilities, or up here, whatever it is, for the town center, as well as the Hagai Institute as being support facilities. This can be a major pedestrian spine down to park systems.
Since we got all this land here since we can't agree on what buildings would go here, but we do agree that the parking should be removed from being the first thing.
We want to have some kind of an entrance up here, or something like that.